But of course, we're here tonight to celebrate Rebecca's debut children's book publication, My Best Friend is Extinct. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, it's the story of Henry Springs, who discovers a strange prehistoric creature in the tunnels under the snowbanks of his town. And readers will laugh out loud as quirky and lovable Henry navigates the challenges of friendship, both with his classmates on the school field and in secret tunnels with his new buddy, Yarp. So Rebecca, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for moderating this session. Hopefully I won't go off the deep end too far. You'll have to rein me in. I'm pretty excited. I'd like to thank Jeanette and all of the good folks at the library, because the program you're doing is incredible, keeping everybody in touch. And I'd like to say thank you for everybody for coming today. I really feel the love and your support. It really means a lot to me. You know, I think we can all agree that, you know, there's nothing good about COVID, but here we are, and we get to be together and, you know, have a little bit of fun for a bit of time. So thank you from my heart. I'm gonna get a little teary, but thanks for being here. I'd like to thank, you know, writing a book, you do a lot of it by yourself, but there's a lot of people that contribute, and sometimes they don't even know they contribute. Sometimes they end up in the book. Not really. But I'd like to say thanks to Mom and Dad. I see you there. They always told me, go play in the woods. And so I did. And I think you'll see that in my books. My husband, James, who always says, more explosions. I don't think he's read any of my books, but his advice, I always keep it in mind. Ollie, my son, who definitely inspired a lot of this book. Artist Cornelia Lee for her incredible illustrations. There's 30 illustrations in the book, and they are absolutely beautiful. So thank you for that. I'd like to say thank you to my editor, Tanya Trafford, who's here. Thank you, Tanya. You really brought the best of Henry out, and you know, I think you get him, and which, you know, means you get me. So that's awesome, because I'm a little weird. Thank you to all the good folks at Orca. Amazing job all the way through. And I'd really like to thank my astute readers and critiquers who gave me great advice. Caroline Adderson, Grace Carey, and my Vicious Circle Writers Group. Sarah, who's here with us, Stella Harvey, Libby McKeever, Sue Oakey, Mary McDonald, and Catherine Fawcett. So yes, thank you so much. The book is what it is because of all of you, so thank you. That was like Oscar, like, thank you. So you're gonna have to bring on the music. Hey, Sarah.
You've probably been writing those in your head for a long time too.
You do. I mean, you kind of always hope, you pray that maybe one day you'll be published, but yeah, it's pretty exciting when it happens.
Well, we probably have some people here who haven't read the book yet. So do you want to start with a little bit of a short reading for us?
Oh, yes.
I'm going to mute so I don't disrupt you.
Okay, this is right at the beginning of the story. It'll give you a feeling for the start. And I think beginnings are always interesting. And I think I had 3 full chapters before where this book actually starts. And this is what great editors do. They tell you that maybe that's not the best place to start, and you push back and you're like, no, I'm sure that is, you know, that first snowflake falling out of the sky is absolutely the most important place to start ever. And then after a while you think about it, and then you think, oh, maybe there's actually a better place to start. And it's 3 chapters in once you get rid of all the fat. So here we go. It's a bit more exciting than the snowflake even. Hundreds of icy missiles buzzed overhead. I was stuck in the middle. Pow, pow, pow. The snowballs pelted my back and legs, stinging like crazy. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, thwack. One smacked me right in the ear. "Headshot! 1,000 points!" shouted Jackson in his scratchy voice. I dropped to my knees and hunched over. A cold slug of ice slid down my neck. Snowballs thumped all around me in the thin layer of snow. With soggy grenades flying in all directions, I didn't dare look up. The school's intercom crackled, and Principal Kirkland's voice boomed across the field. "Students are reminded that throwing snowballs is strictly forbidden. Enjoy the snow." For a heartbeat, the snowballs stopped. I had a quick look around. Over by the forest, Jackson and Maddie froze mid-scoop. Their friends paused too. On the opposite side of the schoolyard, near the fence, was another pack of kids, holding their snowballs in the air. I could see Coco and Lucas rolling a huge snowball up to them. What were they doing? Making a snowman? Didn't they realize we were in the middle of a full-scale battle? "We're not throwing snowballs," yelled Jackson at the school. He was always hoarse, like he'd been cheering at a championship hockey game the night before. "We're throwing ice balls." I ducked my head as a battery of snowballs winged into the sky. Whack, whack, whack. 3 of them nailed me in the back. I had to get out of here. I started to crawl on hands and knees towards Lucas and Coco. They were the only ones definitely not attacking me. Bam! It seemed my backside was an especially popular target. Then I caught one across the top of my head. My toque went flying. That was it. I was done. I spread out on the ground, closed my eyes, and covered my head with my arms as best I could. Suddenly, someone grabbed my hands. I kept my eyes closed, too terrified to open them or try to fight back. They started dragging me across the snow. I felt my pants sliding down, the snow scraping my bare belly like burning hot coals. I was sure that any second now they'd slide all the way down, and then I would die of fatal embarrassment. They stopped, rolled me over. A purple toque with 2 big brown eyes peered down. "Henry, are you okay?" It was Coco. I blinked. Lucas leaned over me too, grinning. "Man, you got pasted out there." With his pointy nose, big front teeth, and giant smile, he kind of reminded me of a cheerful beaver. He handed me my toque and I stuffed it back over my head and ears. "Keep your head down," he warned. I sat up and realized the mini ice bombs weren't hammering us anymore. That was because we were hidden behind the big snowball. Coco and Lucas weren't making a snowman. They were building a snow fort. What I didn't know yet was that eventually would become a gigantic snow fort, and that someday it would protect us from things much worse than ice balls. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you, Beck. That was great.
Look at those chat comments.
It's so fun and so much action that you started with, and I would like to talk about that a little bit because I'm curious. You mentioned that wasn't where you originally started, and so I'm just wondering where the original idea for the story came from, because obviously what winds up in the book as your start is not necessarily the start of the idea.
Yeah. So the very beginning of this idea, I realized I'm actually fanatical about snow, and many of our mountain friends will probably feel the same. Even we had snowflakes coming down today and I got a little excited. I'm like, "Oh, do you think we could go back to winter and just, okay, now I'm crazy." But I love snow, and I grew up in Victoria, and it's very green in Victoria, maybe a couple days of year. You get snow, and every morning I would wake up and it would be green, and my heart would fall a little bit because I was thinking, oh, maybe it'll snow today. So when I moved to Whistler, I got, it's pretty exciting. And even though it snows a lot and I spend a lot of time outdoors, I can't be outdoors all the time. So I spend a lot of time looking out the window, admiring the snow coming down. And in a big winter, we get these really big snowbanks because, you know, the snow plows are going by all day and they just get bigger and bigger until they're really at the top of signposts, and they're very lumpy. And I would stare out at these snowbanks and I would just think, man, wouldn't it be cool if there were creatures in there and they came out at night and they wandered around and nobody knew, and then they would go back in. So that was sort of the very beginning, and I thought, maybe that's a picture book. I could see it as a picture book. So that's sort of the very start.
And then can you lead us a little bit through your writing process, both with this book and in general?
Sure. So I guess I think I'm a little bit like a magpie. So, you know, as far as the writing process, it's, you know, see shiny thing. Ooh, that's useful. I could grab that and put it in. I could put that in. I mean, they're not always shiny things. Sometimes they're ugly things. But you know, you just sort of collect things that you see in life and things that pop into your head. So for me, it's somewhat random, but it starts to snowball. And so for this book, started with the snowbanks, and I thought picture book. And over time, you know, I think if you keep returning to ideas, then you know you're onto something. And at some point, I thought about, what if they're not just hiding in there, but there's these snowbanks, these animals can create tunnels in the snowbanks and they can move around and nobody knows they're there because they can move around. And, you know, what conditions would you need for that? Well, you'd need it to snow all the time. And so in the story, and it's never really I never really say why, but, you know, there's some allusions to climate change, but it just snows all the time in the book. It snows every day. And actually, that's one thing that Cornelia captured so well is every image has beautiful snow coming down. So snowing all the time. And then at some point, and I think probably this was observing, you know, middle grade kids, was seeing a certain child that has a certain level of energy and joy and just fearlessness and, you know, leap first, look later. And so that became the essence of Henry. And then once I found that character, the whole idea started to gel as this young guy who often gets into a bit of trouble because he's so enthusiastic. It's not always ideal to have kids jumping on their desks in school. So, you know, when they see the first snowflake. And then I think I was doing a bit of research. So it was an imagined creature at that point. And then somewhere along the way, I started to think, you know, I think the sort of trope that we think of for Ice Age creatures perhaps is the saber-toothed cat. And so I started researching the cat, and then I found all these other creatures which only went extinct 10,000 years ago, such as the short-faced bear. And so then I thought, well, maybe I can connect this to a real creature that has gone extinct, only it hasn't. And I thought, well, you know, we live right next to the wilderness. Just a few months ago, I thought I'll just go for a hike with my snowshoes with a friend. And within half an hour, we were completely lost. So, hey, Val. So the wilderness is incredible. There's nowhere out there in big parts of Canada. You can go for a quick walk and you're in trouble. So it seemed plausible to me that you could have pockets of the wilderness with these extinct creatures, and they managed to make their way back into town with the conditions of the snowfall and being able to move through these tunnels hidden from all of the adults all of the teachers, and really only the kids know about them. So that was my process.
That was great. You've done a wonderful job of world building, and this winter for sure, I'm seeing the snowbanks differently, having read your book, and imagine it's so easy to imagine. Well done.
Thanks, Sarah.
Do you want to do another short reading?
Oh yeah. Okay, so I will. I'll show you a picture actually. This is Henry when he first meets the snow creature. And so he's at this point, he's having some trouble in school. He has a bit of trouble making friends, and he's sort of got two tentative friends, Coco and Lucas, but he's also had a really rough time with some bullying, and he's been injured. He's actually got a concussion through the bullying, so he's had to stay home, and with all of the snow that's been falling, there have been rumors sort of floating around that there might be some weird things happening in town. And his mom talks about, so his mom's a snowplow driver. And she said she's seen a few strange things, like maybe some, I don't know, things out of the corner of her eye that might be running around out there. And Henry thinks this is pretty incredible. So he's at home and he decides to actually go and look for potential creatures, and he ends up on an expedition, sliding over a cliff and falling straight into one of these snowbanks and into the tunnel. Whereas you and I would probably run away or try and crawl out, Henry is intrigued, and he senses that he's not the only one in this tunnel, and so he decides to go ahead, and he does. His spider senses are tingling. He's felt something. He's seen a flash, and where we would run away from a potential monster, he runs towards it. I followed at full tilt. My breath punched in and out until my lungs felt like they would pop. I was just about to give up when the creature stopped and flopped over. What? Something was clearly wrong with it. Maybe it was sick or injured. I had to help. Carefully, I inched toward it. I could see its belly heaving up and down. The animal lifted its head and blinked at me. I froze. I had never seen anything like it. Pale blue eyes, the same color as the walls of snow, shone in the light. Covered in thick white fur, the creature had faint gray stripes above its eyes and two triangular ears poking out from the top of its head. It reminded me of a mashup of a polar bear and something out of Dr. Seuss, with its huge, oversized paws, long, skinny legs, and a short snout like a lion's. Something about those eyes made me unfreeze. I was still a little scared, but I had this urge to stick my hands in the creature's fur and give it a pat. When I got close enough to touch it, I took off my gloves. I reached out to stroke it. Underneath its fur, I could feel a bone poking out. A low growl rumbled in its throat. I won't hurt you, I said. Suddenly, it snapped at me, its teeth scraping over the back of my hand. I yelped and flew backward, landing on my backpack. I rolled over and sat up. The creature lowered its head and shut its eyes. Was it dying? Or maybe it was starving. Poor guy, I said in a soft voice. Are you hungry? A threatening growl was the answer. The back of my hand throbbed. Under the glare of the flashlight, I could see two long red scrapes. But I still felt like I needed to help. I opened my backpack and took out my thermos. I unscrewed the lid and filled it to the brim with water. Then I pushed the lid toward the mouth of the creature until my arm was within snapping distance. Would it chomp my hand again? I nudged the lid closer. The white head didn't move. I poked the lid again and again until it was inches from the tip of the animal's black nose. I waited. Nothing happened. Here's a little bit of water for you. A weak growl. A sniff. White whiskers quivered. A pink tongue slipped out sideways and dipped into the lid, scooping in the water and then sliding back into the creature's mouth. The tongue moved like it had a mind of its own, separate from the animal, which didn't budge or open its eyes. After a minute, the tongue had slurped up all the liquid it could reach, and it disappeared back into the mouth. More water? I asked. The creature gave a huge yawn and said, "Yarp." I was stunned. Yarp? Was that a yawn? Or the word yes? I reached out hesitantly for the lid and stopped midway. Was this a trick? Would the creature snatch my hand and try to eat me? I could tell it was definitely thirsty, hungry too by the looks of it. I leaned in closer, and that's when I noticed the bloody matted wound on its front leg between its big paw and knee. I grabbed the lid, filled it, and thrust it near the animal's snout. The nose twitched. Here you go, more water. The animal lapped it up, this time with more enthusiasm. Maybe the first drink had brought it back to life. When the water was all gone, I asked, "More water?" "Yarp." "Yarp," I said, filling the lid again. This time, I didn't bother to pull my hand away.
Oh, that was lovely.
Thanks. It's one of my favorite parts where
It is.
they meet for the first time.
They're so sweet together, and they wind up forming a very unusual friendship. Can you talk a little bit about the theme of friendship and the theme of bullying, both of which?
Sure. Yeah, so I mentioned before, Henry does have a little bit of trouble making friends. He's in a new town, and one of the themes is about navigating friendships and how you become a good friend. And even though there's some unkindness that happens to Henry that is totally outside his control, the kids are basically kind of mean. There are other friendships he has where he causes some of the problems himself by telling some fibs, lies. And so he's trying to navigate these friendships and figure them out. And this creature that he rescues and really brings back to life becomes a very good friend in that he always listens to Henry, even though he does try and chomp his hand a few times. He's a great listener, and he ends up kind of sticking with him, and they have a lot of fun together in the snow cave that Henry builds. And so I think this gives Henry a feeling that he is cared about beyond his mother, and so that really ends up being something that gives him courage, I think, and the bravery to do what he does. Now, on the bullying side of things, and I think this is a little bit different from a lot of books, is that, I mean, a lot of times when you have bullying, and it's a very common theme because, navigating friendships is really tough when you're in school. And one of the things that I think is a little different is that the bullies in the story end up becoming drawn into Henry's world, and they end up getting a chance to play the hero too. And so in a way, all the kids get this chance to play the hero as well, to solve a really big problem that's way bigger than their snowball fights. So I like that part of it. And it's not, the bullies, they don't actually ever apologize or really get told off, but they get a second chance. And I think that's important, that, we should allow people second chances, that they can be better, and recognize that. And so that part, I do like about that as well, that everyone gets a chance to kind of contribute to solving a problem.
And you've given all of your characters, because of that, are very well rounded. It's not just that, well, there's the bullies and they're always bad. There's depth to all the characters. So just changing gears a little bit here, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the illustrations. So as you've mentioned before, there's over 30 illustrations in the book done by Cornelia Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a bit about the process of working with the publisher and how the illustrations fit into the book?
Mm-hmm. So this is my first book, and I didn't, even though I've been involved with the Writers' Festival for decades, I didn't know too much about the actual nitty-gritty of how a book comes together. And when I wrote the book, I had a feeling for the age. I feel very close to the sort of 8 to 12-year-old. I feel like teenagers, I'm like, oh, I'm still scared. So I feel like I could step back into my 9-year-old self really easily. But I didn't know too much about publishing for that age. And so I never really imagined having any illustrations at all. And then Orca wanted to have illustrations, and I thought, fantastic. And we talked a little bit about the sort of style, and not too cartoony, but not too realistic, and sort of somewhere in between. And so they found an illustrator, and her name is Cornelia Lee, and she started creating sketches for all of the characters. And I was just overcome by how gorgeous they are and how much they contribute. And I think what she's captured really is the emotion and the energy. So, for example, like if I look at the last illustration, to me, it's just, it's such a moment. I don't know if you can see it. It's a moment. I don't want to give the book away, but it's a moment. And, if I was drawing, because I love to draw, I would draw Henry with his scarf hanging down, but Cornelia's drawn is a sweeping scarf in the wind. So and the snow, she just captures the feeling and the feeling and the energy of that world. The other thing I'd like to say that I think the illustrations really add to the book is it is pretty fast paced. It moves along pretty quickly. There's a lot of adventure. And so I think the illustrations give the reader a moment to just imagine the world and sit there and just kind of look at the picture and to really take a breath. And I think you need those breaths. Like, you can't just read at like this pace all the time, because you won't get to sleep, right? You'll be like, I got to read the next chapter. So
That's a good point.
I think it's good to have a breath. I should take one right now.
Tanya wants to know if you have a favorite illustration. And while you think about that one and perhaps look for it, I'm going to show mine. I keep showing this off to people because one of the things Rebecca did was send some photos to Cornelia. And this illustration, part of why I love it is because it looks an awful lot like Spring Creek School, which is right around the corner from Rebecca and where I teach. And all through reading this book from first draft right to finished draft, I've been picturing them in that school and in that yard. And so I just love it. But how about you, Beck? What's your favorite one?
Yeah, oh well, I dearly love the cover, because, and again, I mean, Cornelia just did some cool little Easter eggs, and she's put the Canadian flag just on top of the school, and it does look remarkably like Spring Creek. But I think, covers are really tricky too, because you want to, it's kind of like a title. You want to capture the whole feeling and the vibe without hitting you over the head with the hammer. So it should allude to the story without giving it all away. And what I love, when I saw it, I just thought, man, that's so perfect. And when you see covers, I mean, I can just say from our writers group, we often will share an early cover and say, what do you think? And I can't say I'm always wowed by them. And we, there is a bit of sort of secret, right? We sometimes go back and forth and we say, what do you think? What should I do? Don't love the cover. So that happens. But from the moment I saw this cover, I just thought, oh, I just love it. And I wouldn't have thought of doing this myself, but Henry, and I like that he's got kind of like a furrowed brow. And I thought, wow, I'm not sure about that expression, but then it makes perfect sense. He's on a mission, and so is his buddy. And that, that kind of sums up the story. So I love the cover. Oh, and plus there's a lot of color, and it's amazing. You can have, there's like pinks and blues and oranges. It's very subtle, the color that's in the cover.
That's great.
Mm.
All right, so we only have about 10, 12 minutes left. So
I would be happy to jump to questions.
I was just going to say, I think we should go to questions. Now, there was one question that came up earlier, so I'm just going to scroll down and try and find that. And then if people would like to add questions into the chat, we will try and get to as many as we can. So Paul wants to know, he's curious about how many months or years you pitched publishers before finding Orca.
Okay, it's kind of a convoluted question, because this has to do with another book that I wrote before this. And I wrote this book at UBC. And Susan Juby was my mentor. So thank you, Susan. That book hasn't been published, but it helped me to get this book published. I guess I started that book in 2014. 2008 maybe. So when I finished that book in 2012, I began to send it out, and I sent it to Orca, and Tanya read it and liked it, but it wasn't quite the right fit at the time, or it wasn't quite maybe ready to be published. But she said, let's stay in touch. And I said, great. And so I don't know if it's kind of randomly, but serendipitously for sure, she reached out maybe a year or two later and said, hey, how are you doing? I just want to get in touch and see what you're up to and see if you've worked on anything else. And I said, oh, actually, I have just finished a book, another book. Can I send it to you? And so I did. And she read it, and it was the right book. And so it's kind of a long answer. I'm going to say a decade.
It's never a quick answer.
No, it's convoluted. It's convoluted publishing.
Susan Juby says that book needs to get published.
Oh, thanks, Susan.
You're listening, Tanya?
Yeah, I might take another, because I did get a little bit of feedback, and at the time I wasn't ready, and this happens, you're not ready to accept it or run with it. So at the time I was like, no, but I think I could return. That book it's weirdly, and even though it's probably even more fantastical, it's actually more autobiographical, which is kind of funny. So yeah, Libby says, yes, love Shiny. One of the main characters.
Okay, so Valerie wants to know, how as a writer do you captivate your audience?
I think you have to find the emotion and connect that with the character. I haven't read too many books where I truly disliked the protagonist and kept going. Maybe 2 books. So there has to be something about that character that very quickly makes you want to find out, oh, how are they gonna get out of this? Or, what's gonna happen? How are they gonna figure this out? So you have to care for them. I guess you don't have to like them, but it helps.
I agree.
Yeah, you have to care.
And there's a few people wondering if there's a sequel in the works for Henry.
Well, Sara, my writers group know, because they've been slogging away with me. I have written a sequel. Sometimes I think characters have more to say and more to do. And so Henry has another adventure. Yes.
All right. And that's all we're getting right now.
Yeah.
I know you've written a manuscript for adults. Do you ever see yourself going back to writing something for adults?
Yes, oh, absolutely. And I'm even tinkering with the idea of YA, but I still am somewhat terrified by teenagers. I'm terrified by my own teenager. And he's lovely, but I think, yeah, I don't know if that's not really an answer. No, definitely. I do have another book idea that came to me. I was nibbling away at another book, and it was dystopian future, and it was so close to the pandemic that I was really put off by the book. I thought, gee, sort of coming true. So not interested anymore.
Yeah, maybe in 10 years or so it'll be something to come back to.
I think I'll have to drastically change it, because it almost doesn't interest me as close as it is. But I have another adult book that's about weirdly mining, and maybe a family legacy, which is, tunnels again, I guess.
Midge and Tim would like to know if you have a clear idea from the start of the age group that you're writing for.
No, it's more of a feeling. Yeah, I feel it's like method writing. You get into that feeling of, for middle grade, it was, I just try and channel the things that were the most interesting to me at that age. And, if I saw a piece of wood lying on the ground, I would start to imagine, gee, I wonder what's under that. Is that a tunnel going somewhere? Is that a hole? Is it, what's in there? And I'd want to, turn it over just to see.
So there's some Henry in you?
Definitely a little Henry, definitely. So yeah, I love Henry.
Do you need to know your ending when you start your story?
I do have a pretty good vague idea of my ending. If that makes sense. I'm more of a pantser, I would say, than an outliner. I outline pretty heavily for my script writing work when I, write short films or longer ones. But I don't like to have too strong a sense of where I'm going, because I feel I will end up being too prescriptive with the story. So I like that sense of wildness, but I feel you do end up writing more drafts if you don't know where you're going, because you can really dig to nowhere if you don't know where you're going at all.
Jennifer would like to know how your creativity and motivation is during the pandemic.
I think I'm a pretty I'm pretty good procrastinator with or without the pandemic. I've probably been less productive. But thank goodness my writing group, there's nothing like a deadline to light a fire. And so once, every couple months, I've got to produce some words.
Yeah, that's a
So
big help.
I thank them. And we've met over Zoom, and it hasn't quite been as fun. It's not as fun not having chocolate and homemade snickerdoodles and purebred cake and Stella's tea, and when we get upset we have a food fight, and that solves problems. Just zinging those cookies.
Can you imagine doing that in Stella's living room?
And Dave yelling from downstairs, Stella, Stella, there better not be any cake on the curtains. Dave would totally do that, wouldn't he?
Us all out.
Poor
Okay,
Stella.
the questions are coming in fast and furiously now, so we gotta keep moving.
Okay, stay focused.
2 questions regarding your teenager. Is he on this call tonight?
No.
Okay, so somebody wants to know if he worries that people will think he's Henry, and someone else wants to know how much he influenced your development of Henry.
Yeah, so people have asked me that, and he is actually not Henry. The essence of Henry is not based on Ollie. Although there were lots of, I think, adventures that Ollie and I got up to that, found their way into the book. And he was my first child reader. So this was a few years ago now. He wasn't a teenager. And he was the perfect age for me to read a draft. And so that was a magical time because I read the book to him. And he would give me feedback. He'd say, "Oh, Mom, we don't call it that," or "Have you thought about this?" So, he'd give me some feedback. And then at the end, I finished reading, and he was like, "Oh, that's it? Are you going to write another?" And then he said, "And I think it was even better than your last book."
Nice.
Because I'd read the one before. So I thought, okay, this is great. Someone his age gets it. So.
And have you had a chance to read it to other middle grade readers?
I have. So early on, World Read Aloud Day, which is a wonderful program done through, I think, by a writer in the States. And you can sign up and you can read to children all over the States and Canada. And so I read to kids in Texas, South Carolina, and New York. And it was pretty interesting because they were all in a mixture of at-home, hybrid, in classroom, and they just did a beautiful job of making it happen.
Well, that kind of segues into this question. Maggie says that Canada is not the only country that gets snow, but this seems to be quite Canadian. And what do you think? And I'm wondering if you got any feedback from the kids that you read to about that, like the ones in Texas.
Well, one of the children, a boy about Henry's age, he sort of asked, what do you like to do for hobbies? And I said, I just love to be outdoors, anything outdoors. And his whole face lit up, and I could see that he was like, that's me. So I think it's universal in that any kid who wants to go on an adventure, and I hope that this will inspire all kids to get outside and have adventures like I did when I was 9, running around the woods. And maybe you don't have woods, but maybe you've got somewhere outside that you can go and make up stories and imagine this world that you're in.
Okay, I think we can do one last question because we've already gone a little bit over time. So Helena says that she's often heard that authors for kids remember their own childhoods more intensely than most people. And is that true for you?
Well, it's hard to say because I don't know how other people imagine their childhoods. But, I did see recently on Facebook, a friend said that he could only remember bad things happening in his childhood. And I thought, oh, and he actually couldn't remember very much, but it was only a couple things and they weren't good. And I just thought, wow, that's so different from my experience. I feel like I could almost remember every day. I mean, I have memories from every class, every, neighborhood kid. I can remember at least 7 or 8 trees very specifically and how their branches go. I can remember those spots where there was a plank and, the one that I wanted to turn over. And, I remember where I fell out of a tree and had various injuries. It's just, to me, it is so crystal clear that, yeah, that is my experience. Truly, I'm very close to that age.
I think we'll say yes. Yes, you do have more clear memories.
Weirdly.
Of childhood. Oh, and so lovely that there's so many positive ones too.
Oh yeah, no, my childhood was, just running around free in the woods. That's how I felt. And it was my mom and dad that really encouraged that. Okay, there was a bit of bullying, but made me tougher. So
Yeah.
survived.
Well, I think we should probably end it here because we are going a little bit over time. So I would like to say thank you to you for writing such a wonderful book, for doing all your great readings tonight, and for your gracious answering of all these questions. And thank you to everybody who is on the call for joining us. And Beck, do you have any final words you'd like to say?
Yes, thank you for coming. It has been absolute pleasure to have you here. I see your comments going by. And also, if you have a child in your family, a grandchild, or anybody, or if you yourself would like to, send me a quick note, my website is RebeccaWoodBarrett.com, and you can send me an email, connect on social. Would love that. And I'd also like to throw out a thank you to Armchair Books, who have the book, and support your local indie bookstore, because they're our heroes right now. And thank you again for coming. It's just, it's been fabulous to have your support all through.